Welcome into the PFF NFL Show. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How about you, Steve?
Good. Is our initial banter over?
Yes. Yeah, you can get into the show now.
Man, that was weak.
Yeah.
Initial banter is now over. We're diving back into some draft stuff on this show, but we got to touch on the rest of the NFL news. We've kind of been back and forth, NFL shows and draft shows. I think we're going to go a lot more draft heavy over the next month or so leading up to the draft. But we still have to hit on the remnants of free agency, some trades, and a few things we haven't touched on just yet. So let's start off with we're going to start off with JPP. Feels like that's a little bigger than what I have listed here. JPP getting traded from the New York Giants to the Tampa Bay Bucks. I was a little surprised by this. Were you surprised by this move for the Giants?
Well, I mean, it was a move, I think, that came out of the blue for everybody, both sides. It makes sense for Tampa Bay in terms of bringing in a guy for that defensive line. Yeah, it's surprising that the Giants shipped him out. It now puts a lot on the shoulders of Olivier Vernon, basically on his own. They have been grinding those two guys into the ground in terms of snap total, just playing them every single play they can possibly do. Presumably to get some sort of value for money out of the big contracts that they've signed, particularly Vernon. And whether it was coincidental or not, last season after that monster workload, Vernon missed some games hurt. So now he's their only source of pass rush. If he's not bringing the heat, who is? They're going to presumably need to target somebody in the draft, but then you're relying on a rookie providing that secondary pass rushing threat, which is always a risky deal for a defense. And, you know, as much as JPP never really became, I guess, the surefire NFL star that maybe he had the potential to be, he did provide a fairly consistent source of pressure for that team and also defended the run pretty well. It's a big hole to patch up.
Huge hole. So he played 1,010 snaps last year. That was second among all edge defenders in the NFL. 91.7% of the snaps. The previous year, you mentioned Olivier Vernon. They signed him in the offseason. He goes into 2016, leads the league in snaps, over 1,040 in 2016. So it really hasn't even been a rotation over there in New York. It's really just been these two guys playing the majority of the snaps. JPP's played over 90% of the snaps 3 of the last 4 years, and the one other year was at 89. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy who rarely comes off the field. And I'm looking at JPP's career. It is interesting the way you say it, because when you have this guy that is just a freak athletically and has, you know, all the bendy attributes and traits you're looking for an edge, you think, you know, pass rush first, a guy that's going to get after the quarterback. Only has 2 10-sack seasons, just to put that into perspective. But even just PFF pass rush grades, never even got to that, you know, like 90-plus level as a pass rusher where he was just a dominant player. He actually ended up as he's been a better run defender, I think, over the course of his career. But regardless, he's a 3-down player. He's still one of the top, you know, 15 or 20 edge defenders in the league, I'd say, year in, year out. And it's a big loss for the Giants. We'll talk in a second about what that might do for them draft-wise. But how about the Bucs here? Because the narrative we've just continued to push out there about the Bucs every year is it's Gerald McCoy, it's Levante David. Yeah, they've added Brent Grimes, but this defense just really lacked star power through the years. I mean, is this that step in the right direction for low cost, too? It's just an exchange of a few mid-round picks.
That's a big key, is that it costs them virtually nothing to make it happen. Yeah, this team has been trying to add talent to Gerald McCoy for years. Basically, since he came into the league, they've been trying to find somebody else in that defensive front to give him help, and they've really struggled to do it, particularly a defensive tackle alongside him, which obviously this move doesn't necessarily impact, but generally they've been trying to find talent to go on that D-line. They allowed Robert Ayers to walk this offseason. I think he'd been actually a pretty useful player for them for the past couple of seasons. They should have replaced that pretty much like for like with Vinnie Curry coming in from the Eagles, but now Jason Pierre-Paul gives them a legitimate kind of 1-2 punch there on the edge. Plus, you've still got Noah Spence in there who could potentially be salvageable as a situational pass rusher. All of a sudden, that defensive front is actually looking pretty good. They also brought in Bo Allen as the new nose tackle guy to be given a shot next to Gerald McCoy. So that could actually be a pretty good defensive front four next season. And then you look at the linebackers behind them, they have gotten significantly better. It's no longer just Levante David, it's Quan Alexander, Kendall Beckwith. I think flashed some potential as a rookie before.
Dropped off pretty heavily.
Yeah, dropping off significantly. But as a trio, those three have the potential to be, a spectacularly athletic and productive group, especially if that front four is playing a lot better. Suddenly this defense looks like it's on the cusp of turning into a nice unit.
I don't want to jump into this whole. I feel like we've been calling the Bucs a potential breakout candidate for 5 straight years now. This is but that was the Jags. That was what we had. What happened with the Jags for a few years, right?
Also not so much breakout candidate, but we were, predicting that Eagles team was going to be good for a good few years before it finally put it all together.
But it was a little different because the Eagles were sitting on good talent. For a while. The Bucs. It does look like though when you do say JPP, Gerald McCoy, and Vinny Curry, just those 3. As a starting base, and then like you mentioned, Noah Spence heading into year 3, who's shown a little bit of pass rush potential. This could be the first time they've got this nice looking defensive front in a long time in Tampa Bay. So I do like the move there. Last offseason was all about adding weapons for Jameis Winston, from Deshaun Jackson to O.J. Howard in the draft, and just everything that they've done with Chris Godwin in the draft as well. So they've added talent in the right spots, I'd say, these last couple of years in Tampa Bay. So competitive NFC South, I like this move for them. So my one concern with the Giants going into the draft, they're sitting there at number 2, and a lot of people think this means, well, they got to go get Bradley Chubb now. And first off, I hate that as a philosophy. I mean, can you imagine if you just kept JPP and you didn't force yourself into even thinking like, oh, we got to replace him immediately with the number 2 pick. And then you have JPP plus whatever you decide with the number 2 pick, hopefully quarterback, because when else are you going to pick in the top 5 to go replace Eli Manning in the future? Does this put too much pressure on the Giants to just replace JPP immediately? And you know how much I hate the idea of going into the draft just to fill out roster spots.
Yeah, it does kind of box them into a hole a little bit. They have to know that they need to fix or add talent to that edge rushing group, try and find another defensive end that can actually bring some pressure, as long as they don't think that they have to do it at number 2 overall, because it doesn't look to our eyes anyway that there is a player worthy of number 2 overall in terms of edge rusher. We just don't think Bradley Chubb is that good of a prospect to take him there. Maybe that's where you're looking to spend your second round, your next pick in the draft. But yeah, number 2 overall, you can't possibly pass up the opportunity to take a quarterback, because you don't know when you're going to get that shot to pick number 2 overall again, particularly if the Browns take a quarterback that isn't the number 1 guy on your board. Who knows how each of these teams has those top quarterbacks ranked. If the Browns differ from the Giants, you're potentially getting the number 1 player on your entire draft board at quarterback, even if he doesn't have to start in 2018. Even if you want to give Eli Manning that one last go-around, you get your franchise quarterback of the future. You get to do, what the Chiefs did last season with Patrick Mahomes, and instead of trading multiple picks to get him in that first round, you just get to take him at number 2.
But there are rumblings that the Giants are not going to be taking a quarterback between, hearsay plus, what a lot of people are doing with their mock drafts and talking about Quentin Nelson and Saquon Barkley and all these different things. So I don't know. Maybe they're not going to grab a quarterback, but if they're not, don't stay at 2 to take a guy. Try to trade down as much as you can. I'm sure that's a premium position for the Bills to potentially move up to, and these other teams, maybe the Broncos if they fall in love with somebody. Jets already moved up to number 3, so you got to think some of these other QB needy teams would want to get to 2. Of course, the Giants are one of the QB needy teams, and we're actually talking about them trading down. Just take a quarterback, Giants. It has to be the play.
Yeah. Well, if the mock drafts say they're not going to do it, then they can't be doing it.
I'm just trying to disguise my hearsay by blaming other people.
Sources.
Can you just please
/ mock draft?
Can you not call my bluff on this thing?
Okay.
All right. There's rumblings. Rumblings. The Giants are rolling with Eli. Division rival Dallas Cowboys. We're doing our YouTube series here, Sam. We're going team by team discussing free agency, and we finally have something to discuss.
Yeah, they finally did something.
Video. Yeah.
They sat back. They bided their time through the first wave of free agency, and then they struck.
Which isn't a bad move.
No.
I mean, it doesn't make headlines. It's not splashy, but, over time, that's the way a lot of teams do it.
I mean, the 2 moves in particular they made, the 2 bigger ones, actually look like pretty decent moves for this roster.
So Allen Hurns, they're bringing him in, former Jacksonville Jaguar, who, like 90% of this draft class, peaked in
2015.
2015. This is just the year of, let's rewind 2 years, and then you're good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 3 years, but
yeah,
2 years away from football from the most recent year played is the way I did that math.
That's nice.
Allen Hurns looked like, I mean, he's undrafted. He was undrafted, and he looked like him and Allen Robinson were going to become one of the best pairings in the NFL, essentially, with what they did in 2015, but hasn't really panned out that way for Hurns. He hasn't been bad, I wouldn't say, but even just looking at PFF grades, his roller coaster has kind of matched the Blake Bortles roller coaster, and a lot of times that's what happens with receivers.
I mean, it always felt like when those two were really good in 2015, it was Allen Robinson elevating the play of Blake Bortles, but then it kind of felt like Allen Hurns was just along for the ride, and he was making the plays that were there to be made in terms of he was just another guy that Blake Bortles was getting the ball, and he was playing well, but it didn't look like he was having the same kind of impact in terms of fixing errant throws or making plays that weren't necessarily there to be made, the ones that Allen Robinson was making. Having said that, he actually had kind of better per target production, I guess, than Robinson did that season. If you look at their wide receiver ratings, which is the passer rating when targeting one specific guy, Robinson was 105 that year. Allen Hurns was 116 by comparison, so another 10 points above that. But it always felt to me that Robinson was the star of that duo, and Hurns was a guy that could make some plays if he was in the right situation, but I don't know if he really had the star power to elevate anything. But if you put him in that Dallas team and he becomes, the number 2 receiver there, then I think you've got something to work with, because we've seen that Dak Prescott can get the ball in his receivers' hands if they're able to get open, if they're able to make the plays that are there in front of them. That as long as all they need him to be is a viable second receiver, I think that's a pretty good move.
Creating separation. That's why he didn't seem like as much of a star as Allen Robinson, because there was a number of plays he was getting open on deep posts, and it wasn't all those contested catches that Robinson made. He did get open, and yes, it might sound simple, hitting open receivers, but the best quarterbacks do it at a higher level than the next tier of quarterbacks. Dak has shown that he can hit open receivers. Last year, he had a lower percentage of open receivers. Again, it sounds simple, but he was not helped out. The running game stuff and the O-line and whatever, but his receivers were not open last year compared to his rookie season. That was a big part of his statistical drop-off. So, yeah, I think it's a nice addition. Everybody seems to be thinking, does this mean it's the end of Dez Bryant in Dallas? I don't think so, but you have Terrence Williams back. You have Cole Beasley in the slot with Ryan Switzer right behind him. Does Allen Hurns at least steal snaps from Dez Bryant, or is Dez just straight up on the market now? It
does sound like he's on the market and may well be on the way out, whether they get any deal for him or not, would they just pack him off? I think you would be well advised to see if 100% healthy Dez Bryant is significantly better than we saw last year. Give him one last go around and see if he can get back to where he was. Honestly, this move strikes me as a better kind of replacement for Terrence Williams than it is for Dez Bryant, particularly because, as I just said, I don't think Allen Hurns has that number 1 wide receiver ability. So,
right, if he's complementing, say, a healthy Dez, or at least the Dez that we've seen in previous years, that's pretty good. If it's Hurns with Terrence Williams and Cole Beasley, immediately this looks like what the Ravens have been trotting out in recent years.
I mean, it's certainly
better. It's a step up, but it's in that bottom end of what the of NFL wide receiver course.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look any better than last year when you had Dez Bryant struggling and the receiving core was a problem. You haven't fixed it by going from last year's Dez Bryant to Allen Hurns. If you try and see if Dez Bryant has more left in the tank and you go from Terrence Williams to Allen Hurns, then maybe you've got something to work with.
I still think from a draft perspective, given where we've slotted a bunch of the receivers, and in our last podcast, we went and discussed the strengths and weaknesses of the draft class. We talked about the receiver group having just a big chunk of guys in that second round. I think that would be a great place for Dallas to pick up a receiver. Need and value would match up great there. So keep an eye on that for Dallas, even with the signing of Allen Hurns. The other signing that you said you liked too, Cameron Fleming, coming off his career year essentially with the Patriots, comes in and essentially will fill a swing tackle role, I would say, in Dallas.
I think he may well start, and they'll move Lyle Collins back to guard.
I think that's the move.
I do. I don't think that they're enamored by Lyle Collins' play at tackle. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do, but that gives them the opportunity to do that.
It definitely gives flexibility. I like that. Yep.
They tried a multitude of different players at guard to replace Lyle Collins moving out to right tackle last year, and none of them really did a particularly good job. So it wouldn't shock me if they moved him back to guard. You gave Cameron Fleming the start at right tackle. That in and of itself is interesting because he played really quite well for the Patriots last year when he was called upon, allowed just 10 total pressures all season, had the highest pass blocking efficiency score of any of those Patriots tackles. That being said, they did give him quite a lot of help to do that, in terms of help by alignment, help with chips, that kind of thing. Dallas aren't going to be doing that. They're going to be...
And you're not just making that up. We actually have these numbers now.
Yes.
That's not like the guys that just scream, my guy was doubled every single play.
Yeah. Didn't get double team help every single play, but was given more help than most right tackles.
Right.
Dallas aren't going to be doing that. They're going to put him out in an island and let him sink or swim. So it's going to be a tougher gig out in Dallas, but he certainly showed enough potential to start and do a pretty good job.
All right, a couple more moves to touch on. Tramon Williams, he returns to the Green Bay Packers, coming off a really nice season with the Arizona Cardinals. I know the narrative in Arizona was, hey, we need to find somebody opposite Patrick Peterson, and they're still in that market now to find someone. But last year they kind of did in Tramon, who had a really nice year.
They really did. I mean, he answered that question, albeit for just a season now because he's gone. But he was the guy that could hold his own opposite Patrick Peterson, do a really good job. Allowed just one touchdown all season on, 63 targets. Allowed a passer rating of 58. Allowed less than 50% of passes thrown his way to be caught. That 50% mark is like the watershed mark for corners. If you can get under 50% in terms of completion rate when you're targeted, you're doing a really good job. And that's exactly where he was. So, yeah, for one season at least, he rolled back the years and looked fantastic. It's going to be interesting to see if he can do that again, particularly moving schemes, to a different a place he's familiar with. But the scheme will have changed, given that Dom Capers, has been on the way out. It's going to be interesting to see if he can replicate that new scheme, going back to where and just simply at that age, if he can do it again, regardless if nothing else had changed.
A worthwhile risk, I'd say, for the Packers, who, I feel like Capers certainly had his moments at defensive coordinator. It feels like his stuff was getting stale in Green Bay. Mike Pettin coming in. Pettin's got a pretty good track record as a defensive coordinator. At Green Bay, I pick him for the Super Bowl every year just because of Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
But this will help my Super Bowl pick.
Yes.
Because I think the defense is going to take a step forward. Williams helps that.
Is your Super Bowl pick every year just Tom Brady against Aaron Rodgers?
Pretty much.
Okay.
One of these years we'll run into it.
Yeah?
It's been close a few times.
Yes.
Just so you
Never
know.
actually come up, though.
No, not yet. We're going to keep trying, though. You got to keep
Every
trying.
year.
Another signing. What? Can I move on?
Tom can't have that many more years left for you to get that right.
He's got 10 to 12, I
10
think.
to 12.
Aaron Rodgers might retire before Brady. Who knows?
Wow.
Terrelle Pryor signing with the Jets. Terrelle Pryor, he threw buckets of water on the theory that you just get better and better and better year after year. He's coming off of buckets of water. It killed it.
No, I get it. Okay.
If I have to explain...
I understood it. I just thought it was a weird description.
You're just making faces at me all the time, and then I have to explain things, and it just loses its luster, and you're making me look bad in front of all my fans.
Use, crappy analogies. That's all I'm saying.
I'm trying to learn from you. You have some good ones. So, look, everybody thinks you just get better and better and better, like it's Madden. Terrelle Pryor, his first full season at wide receiver was 2016. He looked great. He showed that he lacked polish in some areas, but it's an easy narrative to just be like, oh, he'll just continue to get better. He's still young at the position. And he was pretty bad last year in Washington to the point where they just didn't want him on the field over much, much lesser names. Guys like Ryan Grant, who went out there and just signed with the Colts, by the way. Sorry, Ryan. But Terrelle Pryor now to the Jets. Can they salvage some of that potential that he showed? Because in 2016, with a bad quarterback situation, he looked really good.
You might want to qualify that being sorry for Ryan isn't because he signed with the Colts. It's because he signed for the Colts for significantly less money than he signed in Baltimore.
Lost a lot of money for the fake physical or failed physical.
You know what my favorite statistic about the Jets is right now?
I don't know.
Do you know how many wide receivers they have currently on their roster?
22.
16.
16?
They have 16 wide receivers signed to their roster.
That sounds like a great formation.
Including some pretty interesting names. But this is the most transparent attempt of we will just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Somewhere in this group is a wide receiver core that can play on Sundays.
This is amazing, actually.
Isn't it?
Down to Lucky Whitehead.
Lucky Whitehead, Trey McBride on his, third or fourth team at this point after being kind of an intriguing mid-round prospect.
Sharon
We've still
Peake.
got Devin Smith out there who...
Oh, Devin. He let us down.
Well, Devin broke many things on his body almost immediately hitting the NFL. So it's a tough one to gauge what he's got.
That class of 2015 receivers had a lot of intriguing names, including Devin Smith, that just have not panned out.
But actually, this entire receiving core almost is just a bunch of intriguing names. Devin Smith, Darius Stewart, Jerome Peake, Trey McBride.
Andre Roberts is there too.
Andre Roberts, now Terrelle Pryor, Jermaine Kearse, Robbie Anderson, like everybody. Everybody
Chad
on this
Hansen.
receiving core is like one of those interesting names that somebody liked really, a lot in the course of this process. So I don't even know that there's not an obvious necessarily kind of path for Pryor to just be the guy. He's just like another body in that camp, and somewhere along the line, those receivers are going to sort themselves out in some kind of pecking order.
You would think that Robbie Anderson would have a role after what he did last year. But then multiple 2017 draft picks in Darius Stewart and Chad Hansen. Hansen's, a guy that, again, a lot of people like and, just needs the opportunity. So we'll see how the whole thing shakes out. I don't have a strong feeling that they're going to get – look, it's worth the risk to just see if you can get him back to the 2016 levels where Pryor – looked like this big body that could really help in the possession game, did some nice things downfield. He just never caught on in that Washington system. And it felt like when he was open, Kirk Cousins makes him a great throw, and he's dropping it like he did early in the season.
Yeah, that was a terrible season for him. I was really impressed by his first year playing receiver.
Well, yeah, of course.
Not just because he was productive. The guy getting 1,000 yards for the Cleveland Browns, given their quarterback situation that season, was impressive.
Granted, he was one of those quarterbacks too. He would go from receiver and then take a few quarterback snaps here and there.
So that was genuinely impressive. But we visited them. One of the first stops we made on the training camp tour that year, and so we got to see them practice. And you think, quarterback, athlete, turn wide receiver, you're going to see this raw athlete with no real route running skills, no real wide receiver skills to speak of. I was incredibly impressed by how fluid and kind of natural a route runner he looked at that point, polished a route runner. That's what I didn't expect to see. So I think he's actually was a fairly natural wide receiver in terms of a reasonably good route runner. Certainly got, natural ball skills. He can catch the ball. Maybe didn't have the kind of quick area burst and cuts that you want to see from a wide receiver that breaks open with that separation. But there was a lot to work with. Like, even if he's not going to become a true number one wide receiver, there's enough skills that you could get him as a quality role player within your group. So I think you should be able to work on the basis that let's write off last year. The whole thing was a disaster. We should be able to get production out of this guy.
If you could find enough reps for everybody. Were you just, I was there scouting?
No, I'm saying if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have seen that at all.
That's true. That's acceptable. That's the acceptable way to I was there scout.
Yes,
in my opinion. Not saying this guy was great and I was there. Therefore, it's weighted a lot more.
I saw something that I wouldn't have seen otherwise.
That's
which
fair.
Is that Cleveland practice, you got to see him run routes, and he looked good.
Sometime this draft season, I'll have. I need full on rant time for the I was there scouts.
Okay.
We'll
divide up a segment for that. And
we'll carve that out.
Ring fence it for later.
Ring fence it. It's carved. It's ring fenced for later. One other signing we have to discuss: Frank Gore and actually Brock Osweiler to the Miami Dolphins. Frank Gore or Brock Osweiler, Hall of Famers?
Well, Osweiler probably isn't.
Okay,
I think, at this stage.
Fair. The takes are really hot from you.
I'm not going to write it off.
The takes are really hot from you today.
It's still possible.
It's a Super Bowl champion,
but it's unlikely at this
stage.
Super
Bowl champion Brock Osweiler.
He's 6'7",
He is. I can relate. I can appreciate what he has to go through trying to throw an object accurately at that height. Frank Gore getting Hall of Fame hype. We were just discussing off air. Is it because he feels just like Curtis Martin to me, just picking up stats?
I mean,
consistently throughout his career.
I don't think he's even as good as Curtis Martin.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
So
maybe all the buzz is just fantasy guys who are like, man, look at this 1,000-yard seasons every year.
It feels like any time a player retires who is somewhere in the top 20 all time in terms of overall box score statistics, you're going to get an awful lot of Hall of Fame talk. Like, I mean, so I know that I have like a stricter interpretation of who belongs in the Hall than a lot of people who are basically like, if you're, a big name over your time in the NFL, you probably deserve in. Hell, Let's throw the doors open, everybody in. But to me, the Hall of Fame is the best of the best of the best, a true kind of elite level of players to play the game. And I always like the idea that if, can you have it said about your career that for a period of time you were the best person in the league at your particular position? Not overall, just at your position. If you can, then I think you're in the conversation. I don't know that you could ever say that Frank Gore was among the best in the league at his position. Certainly not the best in the league at his position,
right?
Ever. At which point, it makes it pretty tough for me to think that that's a Hall of Famer.
No, that's fair. I think that's where I am on the whole thing.
I don't think that being durable for an extended period of time is a Hall of Fame quality. Like, you don't.
No, it's maintaining some level of production while added to the durability.
But those guys, they get that level of production essentially simply by being durable. Like, they're a reasonable player, but they don't break, and that's why they're getting the yardage.
It's like a chicken or the egg thing. I don't know if he puts a dent into. I mean, this feels like one of those situations where you're going to put Frank Gore on the field to pick up his 3 yards, and then Kenyon Drake's over there on the side ready to pick up 7, and Gore's going to be stealing carries from him.
Yeah.
All right. So put that one down as what we're going to be saying. Tweets from 8 months from now. Is that where we are? All right. So let's get into some draft stuff. This is what everybody really tunes in for. That wraps up our NFL news review. I want to get into the draft. Sam, you and I are going to be writing pretty much once a week. We've been doing this for much of draft season, going deep dives into certain players, their skill sets, how they translate to the NFL. Had a lot of fun with this already. My favorite is probably Derwin James. Do you have a favorite one that you've written so far? Was it your Saquon Barkley one that we talked about the other day? Was a really good in-depth piece just breaking down his strengths and weaknesses. Do you have a favorite so far?
That one took the most work because it's a real weird high wire act to try and walk, trying to illustrate that Saquon Barkley is a flawed prospect without making it sound like you hate the guy.
Right. I like him, but
I like the Shaq Griffin one. I'm declaring that I was basically the founder of the Shaq Griffin bandwagon.
Your guy.
Yeah, I missed it by 1 game. So I discovered that his very first college game actually took place in Dublin, and I could have been there live. I could have seen it in the flesh. I didn't.
It would have been the one advantage that you had living in Ireland.
Exactly. The one time it was useful, and I didn't get to see it. But his very first game the next season, I saw him on the field, and initially it was just like a curiosity. Oh, look, this outside linebacker here has only got one hand. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, how about that?
Then later it was, the one-arm kid is kind of good. Like, he's getting pressure against this left tackle. Let's keep an eye on him. And it turns out he's a really good player. So
he's gotten better and better.
Yeah. So I right at the start of that bandwagon. So I kind of enjoyed writing that piece.
Yeah. So we've got these going. Derwin James for me, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody knows my Derwin love, but I actually went into it thinking, here's this big oversized safety. I think I'm going to find some weaknesses when he covers the slot, and then you start to see some of the plays when he's covering shifty slot receivers, and it's like, oh man, this is, we positioned it as this is exactly what the NFL needs, a lot like the piece we're going to talk about that you wrote about today. Derwin is the guy that the NFL needs to, combat the versatile offenses that we see. So this week, you're writing up Roquan Smith. That's already up on the site. Maurice Hurst, as of recording time, not up on the site yet, but it will be for most of you by the time you listen. Maurice Hurst from Michigan.
Why Steve is obsessed with Maurice Hurst.
Nobody understands those inside jokes, Sam.
Well, a few years ago, we wrote an article where the headline was entitled, "Why PFF is Obsessed with DeForest Buckner." The author of that headline is no longer with PFF. I'm not saying those two are related.
The author of the piece, however, is you.
Yes. Much to my dismay, that was the title that was used.
We were very upset with that headline.
I'm not saying that the two are connected. I'm just saying.
We did not like that headline.
Those are the facts.
So in honor of that DeForest Buckner piece, we might call this why PFF is obsessed with Maurice Hurst. Maybe not, though.
Yeah.
So I'll be discussing Maurice Hurst. You'll be discussing Roquan Smith. What are you calling this guy, linebacker from Georgia?
Bootleg Deion Jones.
Bootleg Deion Jones.
Somebody on my Twitter today used, and I'm now going to thieve and use for the rest of this draft period. I think it's a good description. It's an apt description. Roquan Smith. So Deion Jones last season essentially emerged as the best coverage linebacker in the NFL a year ago, and potentially the best coverage linebacker in the league going forward, although he's going to have to work to steal that crown from Luke Kuechly. And what was really amazing about how he did that is that he didn't kind of do it quietly in the background, just sort of making a small play here or there the way Kuechly did when he developed into that. He went on a run of 3 or 4 games back-to-back where his coverage skills were the difference between the Falcons winning and losing. You know, he intercepted a pass from Drew Brees in the end zone to seal a win against the Saints. He then shuts down Greg Olsen late in the game when the Panthers were chasing. Covers him man-to-man, just kills that game. Into the playoffs, he was the guy that was employed to neutralize Todd Gurley, who'd been such an effective receiving weapon for that Rams offense. You know, his coverage became the difference for the Falcons defense over that run. And when you throw on the tape of Roquan Smith from Georgia, it's exactly the same kind of player. And, you know, that is today's prototype, today's linebacker prototype. I started this piece by talking about gone are the days when you need a linebacker now to be 6'5" and 250 pounds and be able to attack a fullback in the hole and stone him and force cuts. Yeah, exactly.
What's a fullback?
If you go back to 2007 and we were doing these scouting, what you're looking for in a linebacker is very, very different to today. Fullbacks have essentially disappeared. You're now looking at slot receivers. Linebackers have got to be able to cover not just shallow screens and all this kind of stuff. They've got to be able to turn, find routes coming in behind them 20 yards downfield and make plays on those. Roquan Smith is the kind of linebacker that can do that, and he's more than athletic enough to go sideline to sideline to neutralize whatever he loses in the run game by not being 250 pounds.
So one of my favorite things when looking at Roquan's breakdown, and you know, linebacker stats, when you look at their coverage stats, they can be very skewed. You know, if you look at completion percentage against, they're always going to allow a high completion percentage because it's all underneath routes and all that stuff. And then even just using like yards per attempt or something, they can be skewed by 1 or 2 plays. But if you look at Roquan's career, he's allowed only 5.7 yards per attempt into his primary coverage. Now, if you took that career number, 5.7, and put it up against the rest of college football last year, it would have finished 7th. And that's with a lot of guys with smaller sample sizes. My point is, he's got this pretty, 2-year sustained success at eliminating big plays and taking those short passes and taking a 3-yard gain and keeping it to 3 instead of letting it get to 7. And it sounds really simple, but that's the type of speed and range that he brings to the table. So he has the range to kind of discourage those deep passes behind him in zone coverage, and then the speed to come up and just make tackles and finish plays. That's what I love about him, and I think that's where he definitely translates from a coverage standpoint.
Yeah, he does a couple of things really well on those underneath plays. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Antoine Winfield in terms of being a guy who's able to shut down a specific subset of NFL plays onto his side of the field. You couldn't run screens, essentially, or those outside zone stretch plays. You couldn't run those to Winfield's side of the field because he would just destroy them in the backfield. And that's kind of what Roquan Smith does. The NFL survives with this group of short passing plays that are designed to pick up 3 yards when you need 2. And Roquan Smith changes those plays because he's all over that guy immediately, and he'll avoid pick plays to get there and all this kind of stuff. His tape is littered with these plays where he's just nailing a running back on a swing immediately when the ball arrives. And the other thing he does that's
what I mean. That's the pass that should be 5 yards, and he's turning it into -2.
Exactly, yeah. And even if he almost never allows those to go more than they require to get the first down markers. There aren't that many linebackers that can do that. The other thing he does that's really impressive is he is able to change direction and mirror a cut from a ball carrier without losing control of himself at full speed and missing the tackle. So many times, particularly with guys that have speed to run sideline to sideline, running back is heading off to the sideline. You're chasing him down to the sideline. All the running back needs to do is slam on the brakes and cut back upfield, and the linebacker goes shooting past because he's running full speed to try and tackle this guy. Roquan has an amazing ability to be able to throttle down at the same time, reach back, grab hold of the guy, and not shoot straight by him, actually secure that tackle. I think he only missed something like 6 tackles all of last season,
Yep.
2 of which were in the run game. So all those sideline to sideline, running down the back, he only missed 2 in the run game.
On 125, so he had 111 solo by our numbers, and our numbers differ from college football. We're not just
because we actually pay attention.
Yeah, we're not actually just handing them out. So 111 solo, 18 assists, and only 6 misses.
Yeah,
that's great. So I'm just looking at all the guys that had over 100 solo tackles. I'm doing this on the fly here.
Nice.
No one else. I mean, you've got to go down to number 26, Tavon Coney, is the next guy that only had 6 among the tackles leaders, and he only had 84 solo. In other words, he's an unbelievable tackler.
Yeah,
Roquan.
I mean, the leaders in terms of missed tackles last year missed 24. So
I don't look at the bottom of our college leaderboards a whole lot.
Yeah.
Because they're ugly.
There's some not pretty. Having said that, I actually think the guy that missed the most is a pretty good player, but that's neither.
Your guy there.
Yeah.
Al-Rashid.
But he missed 4 times as many tackles as Roquan did. But his ability to throttle down and secure tackles, despite, again, being only, he weighed into the combine at 230-something, having been 220-something beforehand. But his ability to do that, I think, separates him from most linebackers.
What you described there, too, just the ability to kind of like change direction with running backs and all that stuff. There was a play last year when I was watching Reuben Foster that kind of, that light bulb flashed in my head, too, where it's like this guy plays with power. He's got some straight line speed, but boy, his quickness and his agility when matching running backs coming out of the backfield is incredible. Roquan has that as well. So
he gets kind of criticism for not being this, not a guy who's going to take your head off. You can't stop your feet when you're a linebacker. You've got to drive through them and finish the tackle. Blah 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 blah. What you really need is you can't miss that tackle, because if you miss it, that guy's gone for another 10 yards, and that suddenly turns into a big play.
Correct.
Whether it's 2 or 5, it's not really a big problem. It's when you miss the tackle completely that it becomes a problem. So I will take the fact that Roquan will stop his feet and will break down because he's doing it so that he can mirror the running back and make sure that play doesn't go very far.
This is where missed tackler. So like if you're evaluating tackling in our world, the way we do it at PFF, it's kind of like just yes or no. Like, I don't care what your technique is. I don't care what you're saying. If you're losing a couple of yards after the catch, if you're securing the tackle, that's the most important thing.
But it's also where this idea of traits gets you down a rabbit hole sometimes. I need this guy to keep his feet chopping. I need him to win the contact point and drive the running back back on blah, blah, all this kind of stuff, none of which is actually making a practical difference on this play. What you need to happen is when he meets that guy out in space in the flat on a swing, you need to make sure that doesn't become a big play. If it's a 2-yard loss, if it's a back to the line of scrimmage, if it's a 2-yard game, nothing in that 4 yards makes any difference to me. It's if you swing and miss because you tried to take his head off and it suddenly becomes a 25-yard run down the sideline, that's where we get problems.
Then you jump on him at the end and impose your will. That's important.
Finish.
That's the important finish.
You drop the people's elbow on him after somebody else has already finished the play.
Coaches love that.
They do.
Let's go to my obsession, Maurice Hurst, that I'll be writing up. And we've talked about him previously on the podcast, but it is, this simple case of the 6'1", 290-pound defensive tackle. I don't know if he's going overlooked because I don't feel like it's the size thing right now.
So that's my question, right? Maurice Hurst is one of the guys that is close to that threshold of PFF grading where you are so freaking good you almost can't be bad at the next level. All the guys we've talked about, once you hit a certain point, they've almost all hit.
Yep.
These guys, Joey Bosa, perfect example. People wanted to start picking his game apart coming up to the draft, and his grading was just so obscene, there was no way it wouldn't translate. And immediately, Joey Bosa hits the NFL and is dominating from the get-go.
Joey Bosa, Trey Flowers, we've had a few guys, Grady Jarrett, that are just at the certain point where you just don't want to doubt them.
Yes.
And they've translated.
So Maurice Hurst is at that kind of level. His grading this year,
Forrest Buckner was up there,
was significantly higher than Jonathan Allen last year's. It was higher than DeForest Buckner that year, albeit on fewer snaps. So what don't people like? Why does anybody think this guy is not going to be a stud?
I don't know. I've seen other people, and I don't pay attention too much to the hype, but you're on Twitter and stuff comes to you. So I've seen a lot of people talking him up as a potential top 10 pick, but I also have people screaming at me. So here's how I know what the mainstream's doing. When I put out a mock draft and I put Maurice Hurst at 3, and people think I'm absolutely ludicrous for doing this, and I assume that's because Daniel Jeremiah or Mike Mayock or Mel Kiper or Todd McShay or some other big name does not have Maurice Hurst close to that number. So I'm assuming at that level, somebody's not believing in Hurst. And again, we mentioned on the last pod, he's been cleared of the heart, EKG stuff. So let's take that out of it for a second. This is a guy, since we started grading in 2014, has put together the most productive stretch of interior defensive line play. And this was even coming into the season when you have a guy that's played part-time snaps, and that's essentially what he did for 2015 and 2016. If you combined his 15 and 16 seasons, they were comparable to what he put out in 17 in a full season, which was pure dominance. So he's been doing it as a sophomore, as a junior, and as a senior, dominating up front against the run, as a pass rusher, and at that coveted spot of interior disruptor, 3-technique disruptor that the NFL needs.
The other thing that I don't understand is it's not like this doesn't jump out on tape. Like, we talked last week about how the difference between me and you is you're kind of paying attention to all this stuff throughout the college season.
Right.
During the college season, I typically have no freaking idea who any of these people are. And when I'm doing games, guys flash on tape. They leap off the tape to you when you're doing things.
Sure.
And the two guys that leapt off the tape to me when doing Michigan games were Maurice Hurst and Devin Bush, the linebacker, somebody Bush. Those are the two guys that jumped out. And you think Hurst is awesome. Like,
Bush
he's
is an underclassman. So
he's not a draft guy this year.
We'll put him on your list for next year, maybe.
He's one of my guys. That's up to 5 now. But Hurst jumps off the tape. Even if you have no idea who he is, 5 minutes into the game, you're going, ooh, who's the defensive tackle from Michigan? He's pretty awesome. But so he is Mike Mayock's number 3 rated defensive interior player behind Vita Vea. I can get it, different types of players, but he's another guy that almost everybody has ranked somewhere at the top. And then Deron Payne from Alabama, whose grading is not even in the same stratosphere as Maurice Hurst. He's got 2 games that are obscene, and if the rest of his tape was at the level of those 2 games,
was good.
Yeah, then you'd be talking about Maurice Hurst comps. But otherwise, it's not even close.
And again, I feel like this is where our advantage comes in. We have every snap graded. He played 1,482 snaps in his 4 years, only 79 in his first year. But if you look at his last 3 years of production on about 1,400 snaps, it's absurd. And we literally haven't seen it from anybody else, including the DeForest Buckners of the world and the Joey Bosa, different position. But these other guys that have gone to the NFL, Grady Jarrett included, these other guys that have gone to the NFL and had incredible success. And I guess this is where we are in the PFF system, is trying to figure out which positions are we strongest at, which parts of our data translates the most. Feeling pretty good about our defensive line stuff. When guys dominate, that they're going to do well at the NFL level. That's where we are in Hurst. That's why we're locked into him as a top 5, top 10 type of prospect.
Yeah, I mean, his grading is higher than the point where we would consider it almost a lock for him to be successful at the next level.
Nothing's a lock, but
it's higher than the point where I think we would consider it close to a lock. Because, from what we've seen from these other guys, like you say, once you're above a certain threshold, we're pretty sure that is going to translate. Whether it's immediately or not, you're going to have success. Grady Jarrett, DeForest Buckner, he took a bit of a transition time, year 2, before he really kicked into being that dominant player. Like, Hurst is ahead of that. Hurst is into that Joey Bosa territory of, like, you are just breaking the system, and it wouldn't shock me if day 1 this guy goes out there and is one of the most destructive 3-technique interior defenders in the NFL.
Yep, that's what I'm expecting from Hurst. So you'll check that out, profootballfocus.com. That'll all be written up this week, and check out Sam's piece on the bootleg Deion Jones, Mr. Roquan Smith. Another piece that you're going to put up on the site this week, Sam, boom or bust prospects. Let's just roll through that quickly before we wrap it up. These are guys that have upside, have potential. right? If everything hits, upside and potential is something I've always wanted to just kind of re-quantify anyway, right? It's not just the quarterback that's tall with the big arm. It's not just the guy that's an incredible athlete that needs to learn how to play football better. It's finding things that can improve, in my opinion, finding things that can improve over time. So you look historically and say, hey, this guy got better at, or quarterbacks get better at deep ball throwing. So if you have a guy who's not good at throwing the deep ball, over time that's something that improves at the NFL level. Or if short area accuracy never improves, then don't tell me that Josh Allen, who has bad short area accuracy, is going to improve. So that's where I am with this stuff. But these boom or bust prospects, all for various reasons. There's injury, there's system fit, there's off-field stuff. So let's run through them, starting with Josh Allen of Wyoming, probably the most obvious boom or bust prospect in this draft.
Yeah, he really is the most obvious. I mean, he's the guy where as soon as anybody football-related sees him throw a ball, they immediately fall in love, and it is insanely difficult to walk them back off that. They as soon as they see it, they're, wow, this guy, when the ball comes out of his hand, it just looks amazing. Like, yeah, but where did the ball go?
That doesn't matter.
So we are pulling out some tapes today pulling out some plays today for a tape piece we're doing on Josh Allen. And you find these beautiful, deep down the field, fired bullets into tight coverage, some of these incredible plays. And then you also see him overthrow a shallow cross by so much that a free safety 28 yards off the line of scrimmage almost intercepted it.
It was incredible. An incredible couple of plays to see side by side, because the post route that he threw in the bowl game for a touchdown that a lot of people are putting out there, I mean, it needed to have that 100 miles an hour velocity on it just for it to become a thing. It was incredible.
And it's not even as if this is a Ryan Mallett problem where he can only throw fastballs. Ryan Mallett would throw this fastball bullet deep down the field when it needed to be there, and then he would also throw that when he was trying to hit a guy 4 yards in front of him moving across. That's a problem for those guys. You're asking them to do, you're making their job a lot tougher than it needs to be.
Oh, yeah.
And this shallow cross miss from Josh Allen was the same kind of deal. There was just way too much on that. Didn't need to be that. But he also misses short touch passes as well. Simple flares to the flat. He's just 5 yards over the guy's head for no reason. So there's a lot to like about Josh Allen. And you can envisage a scenario in which he kind of puts a lot of it together. I think you're always going to see inaccuracies there, but he can cut down on some of the mistakes. I think he does have the ability to go through reads, progressions, find the right play. You can probably teach him to be a little bit more.
He doesn't always want to, though.
No, but this was, you had the same kind of criticism, not to the same extent, but you had some of the same problems with Carson Wentz as well, and he definitely improved that at the next level, got quicker going from 1, 2, 3 in his reads, hung in the pocket a little bit more.
Right.
Some of that stuff can improve, so you can certainly envisage a scenario whereby Josh Allen gets better at that stuff, is still going to be a little bit of an inaccurate quarterback. Again, probably like Wentz, like Cam Newton. There are quarterbacks like that in the NFL.
I mean, it's what I just wrote about Lamar Jackson, too. If you need to have something else special to make up for throw inaccuracy, Allen at least has that with his arm strength. He does have the athleticism, and he has the ability to make those plays outside the pocket. So, yeah, I can see a scenario where he's a guy that has a boom or bust, high yards per attempt, a low completion percentage type of season, like a Cam might, like Lamar might, because they can make those downfield throws, but they're going to miss some of the easy ones.
But you can equally see a scenario where this is basically who he is, and you're not going to fix it.
You could see that as well.
Where you're just going to get this guy who's got an amazing arm, looks fantastic when it goes right, but the amount of times it goes wrong dramatically outweighs the amount of times it goes right, and he'll never be viable.
So check out, you'll go through all these guys on the piece. Arden Key from LSU, edge defender, another guy that kind of stands out in this. We don't have to go through the entire list, but what do you think about Key and his boom or bust prospects? For me, it was a guy that started off on this Myles Garrett-like trajectory, having unbelievable success as a true freshman in the SEC, whereas Myles Garrett kind of did it as an undersized edge and then just got bigger, stronger, better against the run, and Arden Key leveled off, plus had all these off-field issues.
Yeah, well, his tape is really good. He's got that bend, that burst, the speed, the kind of the stuff you can't teach that we've struggled to find in this edge rush class a lot. But you have the fact that he never got bigger and stronger. He weighed in at the combine at a concerningly low weight. For a guy that big, that tall, there was no size there.
He's in the 240s, and I don't like to get caught up in this. Well, he's a 3-4 outside backer now, but you still have a base defense to play. And NFL teams that play a base 4-3 are going to think twice about calling this guy a defensive end, right? Like, he might be eliminated from certain team boards on size alone.
And the thing is, the 240s is one thing if you're relatively short, you're compact, there's some bulk there. But when you're a big, tall, long guy, 240s is lightweight. It's lighter than Tim Williams weighed when he had the same kind of problem. He suddenly looked like this incredibly thin, lightweight, lack of kind of inertia coming with him when he hits you. This is the same deal with Key. Plus, you've got the off-field issues that, dismissing himself from the team, essentially quitting on the team. What was that? How's that going to play out at the next level? So if he realizes that athletic potential and the talent we've seen, it could be a boom or it could be complete disaster.
If I know the NFL,
which I'm sure you do,
they got to the bottom of the Arden Key stuff. The way they grill these guys with just the good, hard-hitting questions. What kind of animal would you be? That probably gave him the answer.
Oh, definitely.
If he says he's a cheetah, it's like, oh, he cheats. That's it.
Oh,
he's
wow.
out. That's how the NFL does it.
That's sneaky.
Right? Oh, I'm an elephant. Oh, you think you're better than everybody else. Ego issue.
Or great memory. You can learn the playbook.
Oh, see, maybe it's interpreted differently across the league. So I'm sure that the NFL got to the bottom of that during the NFL Combine interviews. If I trust those guys.
Yeah.
Any of these other guys I don't want to run through all of them, but just names on the list that are going to come up in this piece.
Nick Nelson's interesting.
Wisconsin corner
had a fantastic season this past year. Looked really good, made a lot of plays on the ball. Coverage was fantastic. I think he's another one of those guys like Mackenzie Alexander who had no interceptions throughout his entire college career. Certainly had almost none. I can't remember if he was the guy that had 0. The thing that concerns me about him is he had a couple of seasons previously at the University of Hawaii, and his grades were not good.
Yeah.
Now, why could a guy this good not dominate at Hawaii, where you're going up against a dramatically lower level of competition than you were at Wisconsin? Where was that good tape? Why? One-season wonders generally are a little scary. When your previous seasons were at a lower level of competition, that's even weirder. Those are the guys you should have been dominating, and then kind of, you, if anything, go backwards when you step up competition, but he went the other way.
I blame Big Ten quarterback play.
Yeah, that'll help.
That's it. Big Ten quarterbacks are terrible compared to Mountain West quarterbacks with Josh Allen.
Well, yeah.
So there you go. A couple other names that you didn't mention, but I think Josh Sweat, Florida State edge defender, is one of those buyer beware type of guys who crushed it at the Combine, hasn't really translated on the field yet, even though he's a former 5-star recruit. And then your boy Mike McGlinchey, I still have this in the back of my head that he'll never – I don't know if he'll ever even be a very good pass protector. He might top out as a good pass protector, and I'm a little scared about that value. Is he a top 10 guy? Is he a top 20? Is he a top 30 guy because of that?
Well, he spent most of his time learning back in the 1990s when football was more of a smash-mouth enterprise than it is now. You can't expect the guy to be a polished pass protector.
You still think he's 40 because of one interview. I just saw him. He's clean cut. I think he talked to his agent. They said, look younger.
You know where he's going in the draft?
Where?
Oakland. They are building a 1998 offense. What better than a guy who came from 1998?
From that draft class.
Mike McGlinchey,
from that recruiting class.
Coming out to complete the 1990s overhaul for John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders. That's what's going to happen.
So much hate from McGlinchey.
I don't hate him. I just think he looks very old.
I saw A'Shaun Robinson looks old at all times.
Mike McGlinchey looks older than you are, and you're not a spring chicken anymore.
I like McGlinchey though. I hate questioning him because I've liked him for so long. But
is there anything worse? Here's a philosophical draft question for you in our draft podcast.
Yes.
Is there anything worse than the kind of the overall consensus on a guy becoming so wrong that it makes you turn the other way on one of your guys?
No. I hate it so much.
Annoying, isn't it?
McGlinchey was one of my early guys. I told you with Josh Allen, I was like, boom, Josh Allen. This guy's incredible. He looks like, best arm and throwing on the run I've seen in forever. And everybody's just like, oh, slam dunk 1.01. I'm just like, oh, boy. All right, that's too much. That's too much for me.
I can't remember who the guy was that this came up with the other day, but when everybody else suddenly goes completely overboard on somebody, and you have to turn like 180 degrees on a guy you really like and say, no, look, come on. There's major flaws here. There's problems. You're just ignoring them. He's not that good.
That was me for Jalen Smith a couple years ago. Loved him as a linebacker, and then people calling him the best player in the class. At quarterback, it was Mike Glennon a couple years ago where I went from intriguing third-round pick to people are calling him a first-rounder, and I'm like, all right, I'm out. And then same thing with Paxton Lynch. It was like I followed him, good size, continued development, good third-round pick, and then people are calling him the best quarterback in the class, and I'm like, all right,
it was somebody in the NFL. Oh, it was Matt Forte. That was it. I really liked Matt Forte coming out, and a lot of people didn't. I thought he could be a really good player. And then in his NFL career, Matt Forte was basically that fantasy football darling.
He was Frank Gore light.
Who would dominate, because PPR and stuff, he would dominate fantasy leagues, but was never actually that good.
He had that one year with like 90 check down receptions from college.
So I had to spend his entire NFL career basically telling people he really isn't as good as you're claiming he is, despite him being my guy when he came into the NFL. That's annoying.
It is annoying. We could have a whole segment on that, but we'll try that for later on. Yeah. Just guys that we liked and then had to not like nearly as much. If you guys have those guys as well, hit us up on Twitter at PFF_Steve or at PFF_Sam. That's going to do it for us today. A little NFL news, a little NFL draft. We'll be back later in the week with another draft-heavy podcast. Be sure to get to ProFootballFocus.com because we're ramping it up. Even more draft content every single day. And, of course, go check out Edge and Elite, new QB annual update, and the draft guide is going to update in about a week, I believe it is.
April 5.
April 5th, a week and a half. You'll get that next update of the draft guide, all part of PFF Edge. All right, guys, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.